everybody. So get ready for an adventure with Bon Voyage Besties. We're your hosts, Rachel and Rosa, and we are super excited to talk all about traveling with a full-time job today because despite what you may see on Instagram, TikTok, and other social media, you don't have to quit your job to travel the
Mhm.
world or be a full-time content creator because let's face it, being a full-time content creator is really stressful. Working for yourself does have a lot of downsides, and sometimes it's just good to keep that full-time job and that paycheck so you can travel better and smarter.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Rosa and we are coming at this from two different perspectives. For me, I am a high school teacher, so I know that my experience is probably going to be a little different than the vast majority of you, unless you work in education, of course. But Rosa has a ton of really awesome tips about how to maximize your PTO. So do you want to start us off and talk a bit about that?
Sure. So I work for a real estate development company. So I have like your typical 9 to 5 office job Monday through Friday, but I'm super fortunate because I've been with this company for quite a while. So I'm basically at like the top tier of PTO days. So that's paid time off, which is great because not a lot of companies offer a lucrative vacation time off package. So I'm very fortunate to have 30 days. On top of that, we also have, I think it's like 10 observed federal holidays that the office is closed. So essentially, that's 40 days throughout the year that I can utilize for vacation time. And believe me, I use them all.
That is amazing. And what I love about that is correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard this like from my friends in industry. Sometimes with certain jobs, they say they offer unlimited PTO, but then people are a little nervous to take it because they're not sure how much is too many. At least this is what I've heard. I'm sure there's some situations that are fantastic, but I do think it's really nice that you know how many days you get in a year and that there are a lot of them that you can take. And it's great that you take them all. I am a strong advocate for taking all of your PTO because it's part of your compensation package. I
Exactly.
mean, I spend all my paychecks, so you know what? If I had all that PTO, I'd take it too.
Oh yeah, and like you said, you wouldn't believe. So I oversee a group of 13 people, and some of them actually do not utilize all their paid time off. So with my organization, if you don't use those days, essentially you lose them. They do allow you to roll over, I think it's about 6 PTO days into the following year, but anything beyond that, you're going to lose those days. They don't pay you out for it. They're not patting you on the back saying like, "Hey, thank you for not taking your days off." So I tell every single member on my team like, "Hey, these are your days. Make sure you're utilizing them." And it doesn't necessarily have to be to take vacation. It could just be just to have like some downtime, just to like mentally decompress. So as a manager and supervisor, I'm a huge advocate, not just taking those days myself, but encouraging every single person on my team. Like take your days.
You sound like an amazing supervisor. I'm just
I mean,
saying.
we'll get into it more in the episode. There's also criteria that you obviously have to kind of, make sure you're following. Every company is different when it comes to scheduling PTO, taking time off, all of those things. So as long as within that structure, but I encourage every single person because, like you said, it is part of our compensation. So when you are having conversations with your supervisor, your HR department about, let's say like a salary increase, that money is already allocated to your time off. So if you're not using it, essentially you're just giving them, working for free in a way.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. In teaching, it's a little bit different, but I do see some similarities. So, with us, and this varies district to district, it all depends on your contract and how that's set up. But we get personal days that we can use. And, obviously, it's not going to be for jet setting around the world because, you really can't do that in the middle of the school year unless
yeah.
you're on a school break. But how it works is they roll over, but they roll over into sick days. So if you don't use your personal days, you'll still have them, but what you can use them for kind of changes the following year. So you get 5 of them a year at my school, and I always use them, even just as mental health days,
Yeah.
because it's an intense job. I love the kids and all. I brag about my students all the time, but it is nice to take that break and that pause on a random Wednesday.
Yeah, you definitely need it being in any type. So in my industry, I do a lot of customer service. So that also can be very draining. Every day it's a little bit different, which I really love and enjoy about my job. And obviously, having those funds to be able to travel and get paid on my days off to travel. But it could be very, very stressful. So I always look forward when I'm having like a stressful day at work. I'm like, all right, just 18 more days to my next vacation. So it kind of like keeps me going.
Yeah,
So
it's
I always need
definitely
to
good.
have something planned.
Oh, absolutely. So, I know with me, so again, it's a little different than industry. I get my school calendar, and I said this in our little intro episode. I get the school calendar for the next year in March, so I have time to like look at it and plan well in advance. In your field, how far in advance do you plan a trip, and how far in advance do you ask for time off? Because in my field, we really don't have to do that. Like if you're off for the summer, you're off for the summer. You don't really need to say much of anything.
Yeah. Well, yeah, with my company, it's a little bit different. So usually around September, October, we'll get a calendar for the following years, but it's just the holidays that we're going to be closed. So, more or less we already have an idea, like, the big holidays like 4th of July, Memorial Day. So we more or less already know those particular days. When it comes to scheduling our paid time off, our employee handbook requires us to submit those 30 days in advance. So it's great because it kind of gives me a little bit of flexibility. If I do have something last minute that I want to plan, I can. And everything for us is kind of lumped into pay time off. So whether it's, if I'm out sick one day or whether it's a vacation day or something personal, everything is part of the PTO allowance that I get, which accrues every January. So from January to December, I already know I have 30 PTO days that I can utilize for whatever purpose, in addition to whatever observed holidays we have, which is like one of my favorite things to do is to maximize my days off by kind of piggybacking either before or after a holiday because now I'm using less days off and going on a trip for a longer period of time. However, even though my job's a little bit flexible, my partner's job is a little bit different. So every November, he has to submit his request for the following year for vacation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing to remember about this is you know your situation better than we do. Every job is different, every setup is different, and how far in advance you have to submit for approval is different. I recently went through this. I have two friends that I'm going with to Greece in July, and I'm super excited. I'm so like pumped
It's
about
going to be
going.
awesome.
Not excited about the 10-hour flight. I don't like flying, but we'll talk about that in a later
That'll be a
episode.
whole
We don't
entire
need a downer
episode.
about that. We don't need to hear about my fear of flying right now. But anyway, we decided to go over 4th of July week for a couple of reasons. So my one friend, she's not in education, she works in industry. And so to maximize the time off that she does get, she wanted to pair it with 4th of July because that's one less day that she has to use. And obviously, I don't expect her to use all her PTO to go to Greece. That wouldn't be fair. And then my other friend, he just started a new job and couldn't take vacation until July. So I also wanted to consider him as well. So a lot of this also depends with how long you've been at a certain company. So, like in the case of my friend, he just started working there and they do have like a period where you can't take any paid time off. Now, granted, every situation's different. It all depends on where you're working and what the rules are like.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I tell every single person is understanding your organization's, vacation days or PTO structure, because that would allow you to plan ahead. And we'll talk more about that, later on in this episode, how planning ahead is a great way for you to also save on travel, right? Because if you're able to kind of plan ahead of time, you're able to look for deals, and you're not waiting till last minute when things either can get sold out or you're paying a premium because you are waiting, until last minute to schedule something. So understanding like how many, days off do you get for the year? Like you said, Rachel, you're in the education field. So like you already know, okay, from this day to this day, this is my summer vacation period. So you already know ahead of time. These are days that you can utilize to travel, right? So knowing that it's definitely key.
Yeah, definitely. And it's even more important in my case. So, for any of you who are teachers, we're stuck with peak period. I mean, it
Yeah.
kind of sucks, but there's not much we can really, do about it. So what I always suggest is, the days ahead of time, look for those deals far, far in advance because the closer it gets, it's going to just be even more expensive. So actually with our trip to Greece, I have to figure out what we're going to do in Crete together. But for the Athens portion, I already booked the hotel and I found a great hotel for a wonderful deal in a great area. But it's like February, so it's really far in advance. But if you're in a situation like me where the time off is a little more rigid because it's the school year, you have to be a go getter and jump on those deals
Hmm.
immediately. You can't really be like, oh, I'll wait till a few weeks out. It doesn't really like work in education. But it's really like good advice too if, say, you're a family and you're traveling with kids and
Yeah.
you don't want to pull them out of school. If you're going during peak period, just doing it in advance is so important.
Yeah. And that's one of our scenarios. So, with my daughter, well, now she's away in college. So, same thing. We're still traveling as a family during peak times, right? So, spring break. So, in March, we're actually taking our family trip to Belize. And that's something that we booked like back in November. So, as soon as my husband was able to put his days in, we got the approval from his job. We know, okay, now we can book our flights. So we were able, even though we're traveling during kind of a busy period, because a lot of airlines and hotels are capitalizing, knowing that March and April tend to be spring break time. So we were able to book that in advance. The same thing with the hotels, and we got a really, really good, amazing deal. And same thing, we're trying to figure out our plans for July. So knowing when you can take the days off, and also knowing when you can't take days off. I know there are some industries, like I have a friend who works for an investment firm. So between like January and April, they frown upon vacation days or any paid time off whatsoever.
Yeah, it's really true. You have to be aware of that. Like, I know in my job, if you want to extend any of the school breaks and use a personal day, you can do it, but you do have to ask for permission in advance. It's one of the few times where you actually have to contact administration and are like, hey, I'm thinking of taking this day. Is it okay? And then, of course, if they give the green light, it's fine, but you do at least have to ask for permission. So it's really important to know your job because I know there's a lot of reels and stuff on social media that's like YOLO, take your days whenever you want, party time. Which, like, if that's your vibe, that's cool and all, but you also don't want to
Yeah.
make your boss angry with you. It just seems like a pretty like lame situation. I know I wouldn't want it. I'm kind of a people pleaser, even though I'm a traveler, big adventure. I don't want to be like upsetting anyone. So just like again, know your policies in and out.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. Like I said, I work for a management company, so I do oversee a team. So I always try to also be conscious of when I'm taking days off. I try not to take more than 2 weeks unless I really, really are traveling to like a location where I do want to maximize my time there. So when we went to Japan, 2 years ago, oh my gosh, time flies. Yes, two
You need
years
to
ago.
go back to Japan, FYI. It's great.
Yes.
We'll have a whole episode on Japan at some point because it's awesome.
Definitely. So for that, I was away for 2 weeks, but I also tried to kind of pick weeks. So I know, my job changes on a day-to-day basis. We're always dealing with different scenarios, but I know what my personal busiest time of the months are, which are like the first and the last week of the month. So I try to be conscious of my team and not take time off during that time period. So that way they're not stuck, not just doing their job, but also they have to, fulfill my responsibilities while I'm away as well. Just because I'm not there doesn't mean the show has to stop. Everything has to go on. So I try to kind of be aware of that and I make sure that I'm not taking time off where it's going to be a burden for people. And also making sure before I go on vacation, everything that I have to complete, that I do everything. So there's no like last minute surprises or anything like that. So that way, when I am taking time off in the back of their minds, they're not like, oh, here she goes again.
Yeah, definitely. I know with me, if I like, let's say, have to take a long weekend for whatever reason, I put my personal days in. I always make sure that my sub plans are done in advance. I always make sure my co-teachers know because some of the classes I do work with another teacher, and it's just good manners to let that person know when you're going to be out so there's no surprises. I always think back to I'm the assistant soccer coach, and my head coach one time told our players, I only like to be surprised on my birthday and Christmas. And it's like the same thing with your coworkers, right? You don't want to just like
Yeah.
disappear and they have no idea and they're stuck with all this extra work. It's just like being a good person.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the reasons too, sometimes people they feel like they can't take time off because one, they don't want to feel like they're a burden, they don't want to add on to someone else's responsibility. So I think it's important for you to always have that communication and again, just kind of be self-aware, like when are good times that you can travel or you shouldn't travel, and just kind of being flexible too. I know there's been times, I take pretty often vacations throughout the year and out of my team I travel the most, so I'm always conscious of that as well. So like if I know someone so if I know someone, for instance, one of my team members, she loves to take some time off in the month of December. So, I'm aware of that. So normally I don't necessarily like to take time off in December. So I usually do all of my trips and all of my planning beforehand. So that way it does leave room for other people to be able to enjoy their time off. And that way I don't feel guilty of when I want to travel or when I'm going to be out of the office because I'm also kind of supporting everyone else. So I think that's definitely huge as well, especially when you're in any kind of industry, is for you to make sure that you kind of leave all your ducks in a row so you're not burdening other people. And
Mhm.
then that way they're going to be more open as opposed to every time you're saying you're going to go on vacation, kind of looking at you like, here we go again.
Yeah, you want to be fair. I'm all about being fair. And in my case, I'm actually friends with a lot of my coworkers. And I want to be fair to them and kind so that when I do go away, they're supportive and they're understanding. Like, you don't want to be that person that just leaves like a total storm behind at work and you're like off in New Zealand or something and
Yeah.
not picking up your phone. I mean, it sounds fun, but
Sounds awesome.
I've always wanted to go to New Zealand. At some point, I'll get there for sure. So, I guess we can also talk about all the stuff that we see on social media. There are a lot of like creators out there, and it's awesome for them. They're full time creators, but there's this like idea that you have to quit your job to be able to travel and enjoy slow travel. And I know for me, when I was actually first starting out in education in my 20s, I would actually feel kind of guilty about going to work because I felt like I was doing travel incorrectly. And I would also like sometimes feel this like pressure that the only way to truly travel is to like not be tied down by like any sort of job responsibilities, that you could just like go and explore the world and be a creator and it'll all somehow work out. So what are your feelings on that?
A little bit of everything. So, like you said, even for myself too, I always kind of felt constricted when I travel somewhere because one, I'm there for a limited period of time. I'm not sure when I'm able to go and visit that destination again. So, I always felt like I had to kind of do and see everything because I'm like, great, I'm only here for a week. I have to go back to work. I don't know when I can take a vacation again. So in my mind, I always saw, like content creators or just everyday travelers online saying like, oh, I just quit my job so I can travel for a year. And I'm like, great. I wish I could be that person. But, the reality, I can't. I have a kid in college. I have a mortgage to pay. And I like the benefits, having a full-time job, like you said earlier in the episode, does come with other perks. So realistically for me, quitting my job to travel, it's just not gonna happen anytime soon. And it's perfectly fine because I've found strategies that work for me in order for me to be able to travel as often as possible. So just kind of understanding, like I said earlier, how many days you're entitled to, that'll allow you to kind of plan ahead because it's completely possible. And, depending on the structure of your company too, like I have a friend who's an attorney and, she's able to work remotely as long as she doesn't have a case, which is great for her because now she can essentially, be working from New Zealand, she can tell her employer like, hey, I'm going to be here for like 2 weeks and she's still fulfilling her day-to-day responsibilities because she is able to work remotely. So I think now in this day and age, workations are super popular with remote work employment opportunities. So if those are industries or fields that you're currently in, you essentially could be working from anywhere in the world, that will allow you to kind of explore more and combine, work and travel at the same time. So it's definitely doable. I mean, I am a firm believer. I've been doing this for years. And I'm a firm believer that you do not have to quit your job. You can definitely travel as often as you want and as you can travel, because obviously, when travel comes another whole aspect, not just the time, but obviously the money portion of it, right? So I think it's completely doable without having to quit your 9 to 5.
Yeah, definitely. And there are a lot of jobs, like you said, that will allow you to take work vacations where you
Hmm.
can work remotely. And as always, just to reiterate, make sure you know what your company's
Yeah.
policies are because depending on how long you're in a certain place, there could be tax implications. I'm not a
Hmm.
CPA. My parents worked as accountants, so I always have that in the back of my mind. So just like always, again, make sure that it's like allowed at your job because personally, I would be too scared to try to use a VPN or something and get around
Yeah.
it. I'm,
Well, that's a
I'm
whole
like
other
I said,
thing
I'm
too.
such a rule follower. I just the thought like makes me anxious. And then yeah, there's like so many perks to keeping your job. You get like a retirement package. You get if you're
Hmm.
in the United States health insurance, which is very important. You know, I have to pay rent. Like they're not gonna be waiting for me if I like quit my job and travel the world. I wish that'd be kind of cool. And then something else to keep in mind. You know, I love all the content creators out there. They're doing great things, but just consider there are a lot of content creators who are trying to sell like courses to let you travel the world full time. So also like think about it like is this genuine advice or is somebody trying to make money? I know that sounds like
Yeah.
so skeptical and you know not naming names. It's just like something off the top of my head. Always consider the source when you're getting this information.
That's very true. Because, like you said, everyone's personal situation is different. Everyone's employment situation is different. Something that might work for me and necessarily might work for you, right? So, understanding your own personal needs, and then you can kind of work around that and you can plan accordingly, which I think is the key in traveling with a full-time job. To me, I'm a very like type A planner. So, like I said earlier, my partner has to put in his request for the following year, usually November. So at least I know around the month of November what family trips we're going to be taking that following year, which will allow me to book things in advance so that way I can say, especially when it comes to flights, when you're flying as a family of three, it's expensive.
Oh my gosh. I get angry enough as one person. I get
Yeah.
so mad at what these flights cost. I got to tell you, I got to complain about this. So I I recently booked to see my family over our spring break, which is in April over Easter, down in Florida, in Southwest Florida on the Gulf of Mexico. It's beautiful. And I'm like, you know what? Usually they charge a lot for Christmas. Let me just see spring break if it's going to be decent price wise. I'm not going to say what United is charging to go down there, but I
Yeah.
freaked out. I was just like, you're kidding me. So I ended up, I didn't want to tell my poor parents. I'm like, you know, they're already helping me out with the ticket. So I just had to use miles. I'm like, I'm not even going to pay this. Like, this is astronomical and ridiculous. And United Airlines, please lower those prices to Florida from New Jersey because I want to see my family and not go bankrupt. I'm begging you, please.
A girl needs to travel on a budget.
Yeah, so and that's just like me. So what you're saying about family travel is true. Those airline tickets
Yeah.
add up.
No, every time I look at something and then I'm like, oh, great, this is great. And then I'm like, oh, wait, that's for one person. Multiply it by three. So for me, planning in advance is key because the first thing I like to do personally is book my flights. Automatically, once I know, and I kind of use a couple of different strategies for booking my flights. So, like, let's say when we were planning our trip to Belize, I kind of searched online what is the typical airfare from, New Jersey to Belize. And then I found that there's like kind of limitations as far as travel days and things like that and airlines. So I kind of had a rough idea of what I can expect to pay. So I put my Google Flights alerts. I also like to use the Hopper app for notifications. I put notifications on Hopper. So as soon as I got a notification that the price, was within that ballpark, I went online and I booked our flights. So now I'm confident that my flights are booked and that I got it at a good price because, like I said before, I hate overpaying for anything, which I've done.
I've done that. I've overpaid many times because I just have this like fear that oh if I don't book now it's just going to get
Yeah.
more expensive and then like I overpay and then I'll check like a month later and the tickets will be cheaper and I'll be like damn
Yeah.
it like why did I do that to myself it happens at least once a year.
Oh yeah. And it's funny too because like I like to torture myself as well and I'll keep the notifications on and same thing. There's been times that I'm like, "Oh my gosh, if I would have booked last minute, it would have been cheaper. But for my own mental sanity, I have to book my flights ahead of time. And if I'm going to like a destination where there's specific attractions that I have to see while I'm there, I would also go ahead and book those as
Oh
well.
yeah. Oh yeah. I remember this was a few years ago now. I went to Barcelona with a friend of mine and talk about planning ahead. I had a spreadsheet and it had all
I
the
love it.
it had all the attractions and I was just like booking them and I was like making the reservations and my friend was like, "You have a spreadsheet?" She's like, "We're not going for another 4 or 5 months." I'm like, "I
Yeah.
don't care." I'm like, "I want to see these sites and I'm booking them now." And she was like, "Oh my God." She was so frustrated. She's like, "You're just too much."
But I'm sure she was happy when you
Yes.
actually made it to those sites.
Yes, yes, for sure. It was a great trip. I would love to go back to Barcelona. It's amazing.
I love Barcelona. But yeah, that's a great way for you to be able to also kind of, save some money or at least stay on target. And I know there's a lot of cool apps out there and even some credit cards that you can kind of sign up for. And what they do is like a price guarantee. So if they tell you book now and the price goes down, they'll kind of give you a refund for the differential. So there's a lot of ways and strategies, and that's like a whole entire episode on its own
Yes.
because we're here to share all the gems, especially, traveling the world on a budget, but luxuriously as possible.
I love
um,
that. I love
but
being
yeah, planning
bougie.
ahead. Oh, girl.
I love being bougie.
Although I
We'll
could be
definitely
cheap
talk about it.
sometimes, but
Yeah. Yeah, it all depends. Like I'll gladly like pay for a nice dinner, but
yeah.
if I'm being charged like an extra like $300 to fly to Florida, I'm gonna be like, United, hey, they're gonna be blocking me. I gotta stop. I gotta stop. United, I love you. Don't
We love
like
you, United.
we love you. Like you take me all over the world. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No. And I mean, that's one of the good things. I don't think we've mentioned this on the episode, but you and I are both located in New Jersey. So, one
Hmm.
of the good things about our location is that we have three major airports, essentially, right? We have
Yeah.
Newark Airport, JFK, and LaGuardia.
Hmm.
So, that kind of maximizes things for us when it comes to availability and like flight deals. So, like where I'm located in New Jersey, I'm kind of like in a middle point where I'm like 35, 45 minutes from each airport. So depending on who has like a really good deal, that's where I'm gonna fly out of. So it makes
Yeah.
it convenient to also kind of understand and not kind of lock yourself into one airport. If you live in an area, maybe there's another airport that's like a hour drive, but you're saving $200-300 to go to a destination is definitely worth your while to kind of look into that. So there's tons of ways that you can save on traveling. But I think definitely planning ahead is key, especially when you have a full-time job.
Yeah, planning is so important. Again, being a teacher, we have lesson plans, we write curriculum plans, we know when the end of the marking period is. It's just like in my DNA to plan ahead. I have the job for that. So, I guess, do we have any like final thoughts on traveling with a full-time job? I just want to say don't feel the need to quit your job
Yeah.
if you don't want to. I know there's a lot of pressure out there on social media, but the grass isn't always greener. And I'll be like real and vulnerable here. I had a travel blog and the Google updates like really did a number on my earnings. So let's say you do quit your job to travel the world and you want to be a creator. I mean, it can be like scary. There can be no safety net. And I promise I'm not like crapping on content creation. I'm a content creator myself, but you do have to consider everything when it comes to that. So don't feel pressured to quit your job. You can still absolutely travel.
No, I definitely agree. And same thing, I have my 9 to 5, my office job, and same, I do content creation. So I share a lot about travels on my social media pages, but when I'm doing, let's say, like a press trip or working with a tourism board or a hotel, that's still work, right? So, like, for me, like, it's great that I'm going to this destination or working with this company, but I'm still doing the work. So, like, when I take a vacation, especially when I'm taking a family vacation, I want to just be able to like enjoy the destination, and I'm still creating content to share on my page, but it's a little bit more relaxed. So I feel like I'm actually enjoying my trip more when in the back of my mind, I don't have to worry about waking up like at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning to capture, content for this hotel or to capture content running around, certain iconic landmarks without the crowds and things like that. So again, if that's you, props to you if you can make this your full time, gig, then power to you. But the reality is, for a lot of us, having a job, typical 9 to 5, is, a reality for us. So
Yeah.
just knowing when you can take time off, knowing how many days. And then just one quick thing that I do want to mention, there are some companies. So like in the United States, it's not mandatory for, companies to have like a vacation or PTO structure. Now, granted, state by state it varies, where there are requirements when it comes to like sick days and things like that, family leave, which is like a whole different thing. But
Yeah.
when it comes to like actual vacation days or PTO days, it's not necessarily a requirement. So a lot of companies might not even have that opportunity. So this is when you can also kind of think outside of the box, right? If it's a job that you have where you can work remotely and you want to visit a destination, that's a conversation you can have with your supervisor, your HR department, like, hey, I can still fulfill my day-to-day job, while I'm in this location, and having those conversations so that way you can still do things that you like and enjoy and travel without sacrificing your job or your career. And just kind of understanding that. Like I know some people that are like in, certain industries. Like I have a friend who works for a shipping company, and 2 weeks out of the year they're closed for whatever reason. So knowing those things allows you to be able to kind of travel, even if you don't necessarily have a pay compensation package, and you have the weekends,
Oh,
right?
yeah, for
Like
sure.
whether
I
it's your
love my
typical.
weekend trips.
Exactly. I mean, that's where I maximize my time exploring locally is on the weekends. So whether it's like Saturday or Sunday or 2 other days during the week, doing day trips, there's a lot of ways that you can travel without sacrificing your job and your career or feeling like you can't do these things.
Yeah.
So I hope you guys enjoy all of our tips and recommendations.
Yeah, I really hope this helps. And as always, feel free to reach out to us. We're active on social media. If you have any questions, any concerns, comments, we're available to help. We love you guys.
We really hope you enjoy this session. And as always, like Rachel said, if you have any questions, I'm totally an open book. We'll share our social media pages where you can follow us. You can follow us on Instagram at Bon Voyage Besties, and on TikTok and on YouTube. You can find us anywhere.
We're all over the place. You can't get rid of us.
Like literally, we're everywhere.
We're everywhere.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys. We'll see you in the next one. Bon voyage, besties. Bye bye.